I love it when we can have a guest come back on because that means they're doing some pretty cool things and some pretty fun things. And I think this guest is doing just that. And we get to have her and ask questions. I mean, it couldn't be any better. Let's welcome back the founder, creator, tour guide, all of the above for Bites of the Bluegrass, Erin Goins. Erin, welcome in.
Hey, thanks so much, Jonathan. Thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. And when we're talking, it's kind of spooky season. We're in October, and you are doing some pretty cool things with Bites of the Bluegrass around this. You launched Haunted Lexington, Spirits, Frights, and Bites. Great name, by the way. How did that all come to be?
Yes, blah. So I've been asked a million times for a haunted tour, and I've got to be honest, I'm not a very spooky gal. I'm like all pretty much sunshine kind of person. I don't even have a lot of black in my closet, although that's changing. So I've been hesitant. Um, but when I started thinking about it in terms of what is the history in this city that haunts us, and you're not going to catch us out here with looking for orbs or listening to doors with stethoscopes. But we are going to be asking questions like, why do we tell ghost stories? And looking at Lexington society during those ghost stories. And when you think about it from that perspective, that totally changes. I'm way into that. So, and there's certainly enough stories that I just have unsolved cases and major mayhem that has taken the city at different times throughout, that it's certainly easy to create a narrative that kind of plugs you into that past while also enjoying some great drinks and food along the way with some friends.
Well, I was gonna say, I mean, Lexington, it's not a young city. It's been around for a little while, so like you said, the stories are there. How much does this tour differ from kind of the traditional Bites of the Bluegrass tour?
Well, there's not a lot of gosh, not any crossover history except for the mention of Cheapside's dark history. We certainly acknowledge on all tours because standing in that space would be remiss not to. And it's all part of our city's history and what shaped us. And I think it's important to take all of those considerations and to take them all in as you're looking at our city as a whole. And we also have things throughout our downtown like the African American History Heritage Trail and historical markers that we certainly would, we should talk about as we pass those. But we don't get into huge detail about it. We certainly do on the haunted tour, considering that many of the buildings in downtown Lexington are on top of catacombs that hold artifacts from that time. And it was a space where thousands of African American men, women, and children faced terrible uncertainties. And if there's anything that haunts this city, that's certainly the biggest. So we're going to delve into that. It's darker. In the courthouse, we're going to talk about the William Lockett trial in 1920, in which our city was on the verge of collapse, and martial law was called here for 2 weeks, and there are still bullet holes on the exterior of the limestone walls there. So it's much darker. We kick it off with serial killers, if that gives you any indication. 1986 was a bad year for Lexington. So it's definitely a darker tour. However, we balance that with some stories that keep it light. And I believe also that the audience knows when they're coming to this tour, we're going to be talking about real things that have happened here. And that's the history that people are counting on. So it all kind of aligns. But so yeah, we kind of hold true to the spaces that we're in and the theme of the tour at hand. So in the Distillery District, you're going to hear all about distiller drama and James E. Pepper, his wife Ella, some big bourbon names you don't know about, like Uncle Nearest story. And that'll be the focus there. Whereas, on our East End, we're going to be talking about the Kentucky Association racetrack and all the black horsemen who lived around that space and the artists that have been the heartbeat of that district for so long. So it's all kind of just dictated by a place and theme for sure.
Well, and as you're talking, if folks can't already figure it out, that's a lot of history. That's a lot of things that you've had to, either you've learned along the way or, you did the deep dive into. How much work goes into learning all the history of Lexington or wherever you're having your tour take place?
Gosh, it is so much work. And I don't know that everyone realizes how much work it is because they're like, oh, it's so, or they'll see me downtown and say, oh, are you having a great day off? No tour today? And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'll work 12 hours today. It takes forever to research all these things. And one rabbit hole leads to another. And I'm way down all of them at this point. And then to shine it up into a narrative that is just the right amount of time and keeps everyone engaged, and also coordinating with the restaurant partners and just making a nice finished product. I mean, it takes a couple months to get a tour up and going, and just all of the behind the scenes stuff that nobody really thinks about, just the listing of it on your website and putting it in distribution, like all of those tasks just take forever. So starting a new tour for me is, it's equivalent of starting a new little business every time I do it.
Well, and you've been able to do quite a few of those, but at the very start of it, what made you launch Bites of the Bluegrass?
So my husband and I went on a walking food tour in Montreal like a decade ago, and it was such a nice way to connect. And I found out things that I never would have known. Like literally, all the buildings down there have these terraces outside, and we're finding out things like the hold that the Catholic Church had at that time. They would knock on your door every year to be like, hey, where's the kid? Like, keep producing children. And so they needed that real estate for the inside of their houses. Like, you just find out all these things that have shaped the culture and find restaurants that we never would have found on our own. And it left such a lasting impression that we went back to Montreal the next year and brought a kid and one of our sons and his friend. And as we've traveled, that's kind of become our main way to see things and connect. And I was sitting on a food tour in Nashville when I realized that our own city didn't have one. And I thought, I'm going to start a food tour. And so I did. And now I've got a bunch of them. And it is truly the greatest joy to share our city in this way. It's very much a love letter to the city. And I really hoped that locals would come out. And I'm really happy to say that still today, we see more locals than anyone.
I was going to say that's awesome because they get to learn a lot about the city and place where they're at. But as you mentioned, you've been able to launch a few more. We talked a few years ago when you kind of got it all going. How have things changed though since you started? Like I said, a couple years ago.
So I just started out on Fridays with a downtown walking food tour, and I had 5 partners, and we just did it. And it was me as the only tour guide for quite some time. In fact, that's why it's my dumb face on everything, because I need to update some pictures. But it was just me. So then I had, I was selling enough tickets that I could add a second day, and then some more. It became easier for me to walk into restaurants and say, hey, do you want to be part of this? Because they saw me walking around groups of people. And then it got to the point where restaurants were saying, hey, how do we get on this? And next thing you know, I've got all kinds of restaurant partners. And I guess in my head, it's so easy for me to come up with how you would spend an afternoon in the city. And I'm a busybody. I'm always out. Even if I'm not touring, and I'm out, very a social person, along with my husband, Greg, as well. And these itineraries are just in my head. And I just kind of create things that I would like to go on. And that present all of these business owners in a way that they deserve, and our city in a way that they deserve, and to share history, all these untold stories that deserve to be told. So it's the perfect trifecta to put together this cool thing. And then the bonus is it becomes this pride of place experience for people who live here, and for visitors to walk away going, who knew about Lexington? That's what I hear all the time. It really changes people's perception. In fact, just this past weekend, I held a couple of bourbon and belonging tours as part of a big push from tourism throughout the state. It was Queer Kentucky bringing the first bourbon festival in the nation to bring visibility. And there are just, a huge amount of stories like Mary Wallace, who was the first U.S. Army surgeon and still the only woman to have been awarded a Congressional Medal of Honor. She's one of 3,500 that have been given out, but only one to a woman. But Mary Walker, she spent her entire career in Kentucky and Cumberland Gap serving, and later in Louisville. And this woman was her own civil rights wrecking ball. I mean, she wore men's clothing, and she was actually arrested for this in New Orleans. Later released, but when she won that Congressional Medal of Honor, she was asked, "Why do you wear men's clothing?" And she said, "I don't wear men's clothing. I wear my clothing." I mean, this is impactful, and it's inspirational to hear that people from Lexington's past have gone on to be presidents and inventors and filled all of these big roles on national, even worldwide scales. And when you hear that story sitting in Lexington as a kid, you think, well, why can't I? And yeah, it's important to share these stories, and I think it keeps those people alive. Because if we're not talking about them, then yeah, the history's not going anywhere. So I very much like being part of that, and I think that's what sets our tours apart, is the way that they are very well researched and tied together in a very engaging way, such that you're not feeling like you're in a history lesson, but that's what you're going to get in the end. I lure you in with food and drink, but it's all just aroused to get you plugged into all the incredible people and events that have contributed to making our city what it is.
I was gonna say you touch on it. There's history, there's some food, there can be some drinks as well. So what can folks expect on a tour? I'm guessing too they're gonna walk a little bit.
Yeah, but we keep it light. So you're looking at a total of like a mile over the 3-hour experience. We have all age ranges who come and have never found anybody that's found it difficult. And I'm very mindful in setting up these pathways that we're going to be in the shade, that we're going to be near a bench at places where we're talking for a minute so that people see it as a leisurely stroll, certainly. But yeah, you're going to get food. We have some that offer cocktails as well. But the standard downtown walking food tour, every day of the week is a different set of restaurants. So depending on the day, depends on where you go. There might be some other tie-ins like the Lexington History Museum. I love taking people back there and talking about some of the massive history that Grass Park holds, and along with things like the Hope Mott, General John Hunt Morgan, that house. Garrett Morgan belongs to that history, the great African-American inventor. And while you may know him as the guy who invented the 3-light traffic signal, you should know that he was also the guy for the first hair relaxer. That's what made him all of his money with the Jeannie Morgan Hair Refining Company and allowed him to go to Cleveland and become first black man to own a car. He developed a friction drive clutch that's still used in cars today. He developed the gas mask, which was tremendous during World War I. It saved so many lives. And to make that connection that, oh, wow, John Wesley Hunt, first millionaire west of the Alleghenies and massive slave trader, also had this tremendous person in his family. General John Hunt Morgan was one of the Confederate statues that was once standing in downtown Lexington. This is his grandson. To make those connections is not only engaging, but it's important. And I love visiting the Lexington History Museum because they hold a lot of these artifacts, and they're working really hard in preservation, and I want to support it and to walk people in the doors and let them know it's there. And then, of course, go right on now to like a place like Agave and Rye, and then you're able to walk into the square and talk about that. But different places depending on each day of the week. East End is a cocktail store. It's called Cocktails and Bites, Echoes of the East End. And boy, are there some echoes. I mean, the Willits Klein showroom has got a vault in it with an active tear gas trigger. J.T. Perry was a weird guy. I'll tell you all about him. And it houses its own incredibly interesting history, and it's all about resilience down there with W.T. Young and Big Top Peanut Butter. And we tie that in with other entrepreneurs in the space as we sip on an Ale 81. We talk about big ass fans as they're swirling above us at Blue Door Smokehouse. We talk about Kentucky Christmas in Japan as we're at Boyd's Sake and thinking about KFC's beginnings and our connections to Japan even still today. So that's a fun one in its own right. And then the Distillery District, that one's on Fridays and Sundays. We go to half the businesses on Friday, the other half on Sunday, but always Crank and Boom and always Pepper. And you can expect to have 2 cocktails, typically an old-fashioned at Pepper, and then either a bourbon tasting or a Wisebird cider. And then you're going to have 3 small plates and dessert. And these food tours are not all that tiny in terms of plates. You're going to leave full, that's for sure. And then on the haunted tour, which I'm going to go on tonight, I can't wait. We start out in the courthouse because goodness knows there's a lot of spooky stuff that has to do with that courthouse. And just the exterior alone, limestone, in the 1800s was seen as a portal to the supernatural. People believed that it absorbed emotions and spirits, and there's a history of covens having come to Lexington because of the limestone shelf that we're standing on top of. It's the only one in the nation, and it's what gives us our rich inheritance of horses and bourbon. Come on a walking food tour, we'll tell you all about that stuff. But we're going to go tonight to the Thirsty Fox. We're starting out with a blood orange sangria and a Main Street platter. So it's basically a Kentucky smorgasbord. Weeda's crew puts on some fried bologna, country ham, some chow chow, pimento cheese, and then some sourdough for Midway Bakery. You're able to slather it all up as you sip on your cocktail. Then we go right across the street to our city's first theater, which was 1849. It was known as the Melodeon back in those days. And today it's known as the Grove on the first floor. And then my husband, Greg, and Darius Miller of the 2018 team, I don't remember which year, basketball team, they've opened up a bartending school up here called Cocktail University. So I take folks up here for a mixology experience. There's a great cocktail waiting, and even one that involves some edible glitter. And there's lots of interesting history tied to this space, particularly that John Wilkes Booth performed here in October of 1862. And so that brings us to the ghost of Mary Todd, and she was holding seances in the White House, and also history with P.T. Barnum, who was plagued with a series of devastating fires throughout his career. And it was him who was here with the Taylor Swift Eras Tour. It was Tom Thumb, General Tom Thumb, January 23rd, 1850. And people came from all over to see him in this space. And from here, we head back to Grants Park, which holds 7 spirits, a couple dead bodies, and some unsolved mysteries. And the biggest one being Betty Gale Brown. I can't believe I didn't know the story ahead of time. But Betty Gale was 19 years old in 1961 when she was strangled with her own bra, and it remains unsolved today. Very bizarre. She was Harry Dean Stanton's niece. And then, of course, we end at Columbia Steakhouse, our 76-year-old restaurant, 72-year-old restaurant, forgive me, that stands on limestone with Faye Cowley, who greets us. She's been there for 38 years. And Columbia's opened in 1948 as a front for a gambling ring for police and city officials. And we sit right back in the room and have a good old hot brown with a blackberry cobbler. And as we recount those times.
I was gonna say you got so much going on, and not just in Lexington, but your tours have now gone a little further. I believe you have one in Woodford County that you occasionally get to do with Chef Weeda. How cool is it to kind of expand beyond Lexington and be able to share all of Central Kentucky?
Oh, well, the biggest thing is having a tour with Chef Weeda Michael. Like, all of my dreams were coming true. She is the queen of Kentucky cuisine. I admire her so much for the way that she takes care of place, the way that she looks to always rise everyone's tide as she goes, the way that she's been so dedicated to Kentucky farming, the way that she runs her business and takes care of her employees and takes care of people in general. And, she's a founding member of Food Chain. She's got 8 restaurants in this region. I mean, who does that? And unique, it would have been so easier for her just to have them all under one name, but she just doesn't take shortcuts, and she does things the right way. And she's just kind of her. I don't know if she could be anything else but that. So it brings me great joy to work with her. I've long admired her, and it's a really special tour that we do together. It's all about horses, bourbon, and agriculture. So we start with the Weeda Bourbon Tasting Game. It's the best science experiment of all time. And it's really fun to have Weeda there herself to take us through that. I get into all kinds of bourbon history. We're just feet from where James C. Crowe was buried as we're holding this tour, sitting there having this at the Woodford Hotel. And Carrie Nation was in Woodford County by then, who was this hatchet-wielding teetotaler that terrorized the nation in 1900. She belongs to us. And then we hop on a luxury bus from Bluegrass Tours with cocktails and snacks for the road, of course. We go to Saxony Farm, and Rosie and Broussard Dunley have just done, their property is just so beautiful. And of course, we pet ponies, and we have some great gourmet starters from the Holly Hill team there, and some bourbon champagne cocktails. And then we go to Holly Hill Inn for the agriculture portion. Wheat is surrounded by gardens over there at this point. She's really close to not mowing. And we're eating whatever's fresh from the garden for sure. And Weeda's giving us garden tours and telling us about Holly Hill, which she's owned for 30 years. It's a 160-year-old home. And you're making all these connections like, oh, Honeywood was the last person to live here. So that's why there's a Honeywood over in Summit. And it helps you better connect to her brand and all that she's built here. And all of that is just a real testament to her love for the region. And she's going to have her own show out soon that'll have this even on a grander scale. And it will certainly encourage more people to come here as a destination. And there'll be a tour waiting for them. And we're actually in talks of, and hopefully by spring, offering a regularly scheduled bus tour out in Woodford County to support all that she's built and pick up some other great partners along the way to create a nice horses, bourbon, agriculture experience.
I was gonna say you're teasing everything up to stay tuned and before I ask about the other fun things that are coming up, if you haven't sold it already, I don't know what more you need to say, but if folks have gone on a tour once, why should they do another? But it sounds like there's plenty of options, and you're always going to get something a little different.
There is. So I care very much about guest experience, and I want to earn your money and your time. You know, you're spending the afternoon with us. I want to make sure it's a great show. And I absolutely want you to come back. So you're going to hear different stuff. I'm not going to bring you back to repeat it, although we probably could because we give you so much information. And that is a funny side effect that I didn't expect. I've created all these tours, and so many locals come back and do the exact same one. I think it's because they bring other people with them, and they want to be like, see, look what I told you. You know, they want to recreate the experience, but I want to give people a reason to come down to the East End, and I want them to understand that they can park their car and go to all these great places. Effie's Trifecta Glass Art Lounge, Boyd Sake, Blue Door Smokehouse, Sav's, Mirror Twin, Rolling Oven. They're all within the space. You can make an entire day of it. So that's the goal. But yeah, you're going to get a different show every time you come. You're going to get you're going to be introduced to different restaurants. And our city is one of the things that makes us unique is that we have all these little enclaves in a way that not everyone does. I mean, Chevy Chase is its own thing. Jefferson Street is kind of its own thing. And it all deserves to be shared. And you can spend a day in each one.
Well, and you kind of touched on this. Clearly, you're looking to go full, full tour there in Woodford or offered year round and things like that. Any other fun things that you can mention or at least tease us with as you got, the rest of 2024 and then on into 2025?
Yeah, well, right now I'm feeling like I need to come up for air for a second. I've got to get through the fall season because this is high season for tourism, spring and fall. But during the winter, I'm going to kind of regroup. I don't know how many new tours I'm going to start beyond the bus tour out in Woodford County, but there are a few things I'm thinking about and talking to some people about, like a chef series in which we create dinners and kind of the plates are the walking tour part of it, except for you don't actually move, but just creating something. So many of the spaces tell a story, and we can share a little history. You're at a seated dinner table where we've kind of placed everyone, and I share some stuff that's going to knock your socks off, and then you talk about it over the plate that also connects. And then we unroll the next dish and kind of create some special experiences like that, particularly during the cold season. You can also look for some mixology classes that I'll be partnering with Cocktail University on, where we tie in lots of drinking history as we make some cocktails. And these guys have some great things coming up, like Cocktails Around the World series, where you have one focusing on cachaça out of Brazil, but you'll make the connection to Kentucky because there's always one to be made. And then I'm also doing some higher by the day stuff now. So I'm testing out some Bites of the Bluegrass concierge things because I know that I could throw some visitors in a nice luxury van, and we can go out to Keeneland, Castle and Key, Wallace Station, Windy Corner Market, Midway Bakery, stroll Midway Main Street for a minute, and I can bring you home. I can share lots of interesting history along the way. So it's just like a complete day where you just show up and I'll do the rest.
Well, it sounds like you got plenty going on, and folks, I highly recommend you checking out Bites of the Bluegrass. And Erin, thank you for sharing the journey as you keep growing and keep doing some amazing things, and I truly do appreciate it.
Thank you, Jonathan, so much for having me. Yeah, and if anybody wants to find out more, I've got a website, bitesofbluegrass.com is where I sell tickets. You can also follow me on Facebook and Instagram. I'm very active on both. I need to be more active on TikTok. I'm going to also put that on my list of things to do in the future.
I love it, and I can't wait to see what you've got coming next.
Thanks so much.